I believe that the Weight Watchers app is going to help kids become more aware of what foods are able to fuel them and what foods are harmful. But what we need to be more aware of and considerate about is that who cares? You eat whatever you want, and if you enjoy it, then that's all that matters.
I think it could, I think if maybe a doctor recommends it and it's really necessary, but like I said, I don't think that it's really necessary for all kids. I think that it could lead to a negative way of thinking about food, starting so young as age of 7 to think about food and what you're putting in your body when your parents should be giving you your nutrients at that time. I don't think it's necessary for kids to really be focusing on that.
Having studied psychology in college as well, I don't think it's the responsibility of a children to kind of watch their weights.
I remember going to the doctor as a young kid and they would say, oh, you're this weight, oh, well, you're on this track to whatever weight, or if you're on this track to obesity, or you're on this path. And I was like, well, what does that even mean? That doesn't even really, make sense.
If anything, it might add to the growing number of younger children being exposed to eating disorder. I think the best way to combat national, rising rates of obesity is, again, through education of different types of nutrients. And also, I think it's important to understand that different people of socioeconomic standings, even though they have this knowledge, are unable to get access to these types of nutrients.
I think, again, that it actually is well-intentioned. And I'm acknowledging fully that obesity is a problem, especially in this country, but I don't think the solution for that comes from apps like this. I think the solution comes from a much more grassroots effort to talk about body image, body positivity, and healthy eating from a very early age with children in schools, at home, with their friends. And if we establish a common vocabulary for how we can all approach eating more healthily, then we're on the right track. And that, I think, is a much better way to combat obesity than a quick fix app or even these portion control situations. It's the right intention but the wrong execution.
I don't like to use the word obesity. I think it's super stigmatizing, and I think that we actually don't really have an obesity epidemic. What we have is a diet culture epidemic, and what we have is an epidemic of people who are trying to control their weight through these crash diets, and so many other kinds of harmful things. So no, Kurbo is not going to do anything. It's only going to make the epidemic that we have at hand worse.
Obesity is a term that was developed based on BMI, which was a formula developed by a mathematician over dozens and dozens of years ago. So we really don't have an obesity epidemic. We have an epidemic within our society thinking that we need to look a certain way. So this will not help the obesity epidemic. It is going to make it a lot worse.
Apps like this are the opposite of the way to combat childhood obesity. The #1 problem that we have in America right now in terms of weight is actually weight stigma. The weight that somebody is not an indicator of their health by any means. Weight stigma, on the other hand, the way in which people in larger bodies, self-identified fat people, people who are obese are treated is actually much more detrimental to their health than actually being fat or living in a larger body. So if we want to combat the obesity epidemic, we have to combat food access issues, and we also have to combat the way in which we're talking about fat bodies and the way in which they are medicalized and the horrific way in which people in larger bodies are treated on a day-to-day basis. All of those things are the answers to combating obesity. Trying to police children's weight is going to hand them a disorder.